Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Inept General, and welcome to our The Queen and the Crone new unit stat comparison video. I've had a chance to get early access to the game. I should have another video up of gameplay for you guys to have a look at today, but I also thought for you guys who haven't had a chance to play it, you might be interested in having a bit of a closer look at the stats of the new units we're going to get in the Queen and the Crone DLC. So without further ado, let's kick things off, shall we, and let's start with the Ever Queen herself, Alarielle. Now, stat comparisons with legendary lords is always a bit difficult and tricky because they all have so many quirks and differences to them. So I thought the only fair one would be let's pick another high elf wizard, and throw them against each other. Now, Alarielle has a mixed chain of high magic and life magic that she gets to pick between, so that's what her spells are from rather than one or the other lore. It's not mixed from as many different lores as Teclis's chain spells, so she doesn't have access to Lore of Fire, for example, Lore of Beasts, stuff like that. That's all spells that is only Teclis's, so bear that in mind when we look at these two. Now, on the whole, their stats are very similar. Now, let's not forget in the lore, although Teclis is a bloke, he's pretty sickly and not really sort of functioning on full form, although he does take medicine for that and does get stronger as his years go on. But that might be why some of his stats rack up the way they do, at least from a lore perspective. So as we look at their hit points, Alarielle's winning out with a few more hit points there. Armor's the same, leadership the same, speed the same. She has a much better melee attack, however, at 45 with magical damage, whereas Teclis is down there with 36. Now, bear in mind, this is before, in the customized battle, before we've given any of their magic weapons or items or anything like that. So this is just them raw, guys. This is them raw without any additions, as you would select them in the custom battle screen or multiplayer battle screen. So let's bear that in mind. Teclis does have his sword, which gives him a bit better fighting stats, but that's just what we're looking at out the gate. Melee defense as well, the Alarielle, the Radiant, is better, and her attack weapon strength is better, her melee defense better, really just kind of better hand-to-hand, better charge. So in combat, they're not great, they're both wizards, so don't forget that, but Alarielle may be coming out if they got into a star fight there, before at least Teclis gets his sword. So that's looking at the Ever Queen and some of her stats. Now, in terms of her spells, she does have sort of a mix between the two. She has Tempest, she has sort of Lifeblood, she has stuff along those lines. Not hugely aggressive spells, but I think she does get Banishment in there as well. So just bear that in mind, guys. So moving on from Alarielle, let's go on to Aleph Anna, the one we haven't seen a lot of, and forgive this picture, but this was of their promotional video that they released, so it's not the best he's looked, and I've seen him look better in-game. But we have Aleph Anna, a missile-focused lord, and the only missile-focused legendary lord we really have him to compare to is Orion from the Wood Elves. Now, it's not a completely fair comparison, but let's just have a look at how they rack up. From a cost perspective, as you can see there in the top left of their stats cards, that Orion obviously costs more, he has way more health, he has a little bit less armor, Orion's leadership is better, his speed is better, his melee attack is about the same actually as Aleph's. Aleph Anna has a better melee defense. Weapon strength goes to Orion with anti-large and armor piercing. Aleph Anna doesn't have that, at least not on his hand-to-hand weapon. Charge bonus, Orion. Ammunition, Aleph Anna. Now range, over double the range of Orion with Aleph Anna. And Aleph Anna can also fire, or as they've been saying in the game, Aleph Anna. But I'm going to keep saying Aleph Anna because it's the way I've always said it. Can fire in a 360 arc, and his missile damage is armor piercing as well. Not quite as much missile damage as Orion, but still pretty good. And one has to assume, I think he has a quicker reload turn. I haven't done a time-to-time comparison to that. That's just kind of me going off a kind of gut instinct there. He can also Vanguard as a legendary lord, and he has a very neat trick we've not seen before in Total War Warhammer, guys, where he can put a substitute of himself on the battlefield that fires and looks like while he disappears. He goes into Stalk, he goes into Snipe mode, you just won't be able to find him, and all you can see is his substitute on the battlefield. Now, it'll be kind of tricky to fool players, but you know, a lot's going on in multiplayer battles, so you can pull it off without necessarily the other player noticing. I'm looking to see some battles with people doing this. It's maybe beyond my own micro skills, but I'm sure that is a substitution spell that can be used, or not spell, trick, that can be used very effectively on the battlefield, and I look forward to seeing how people play around with it. But yeah, so he leaves a doppelganger of himself that fires, that can take damage, that you can control and move around, while he disappears, goes into ambush, and he gets snipe ability, which means he can shoot without being found in that stance as well. So a good way to get him maybe out of trouble, or to get him to a maneuverable position. And he can whittle down heroes. If you have a hero focused down with a clear line of sight, Aleph Anna will take down a hero before it gets to your battle lines if it starts at the edge of his range. I've done it, I've seen it happen, it's pretty impressive. So that's Aleph Anna, guys. And so moving on from the free LC Legendary Lord, we will go to the hero, and that is the Handmaidens of the Ever Queen. Her protectors, the elite of her bodyguard, fantastic warriors, both melee and missile focused. Now let's have a closer look at them, and we have them on anti-large, charge defense against large foes, and bows of Avalon, which is just the magical bow skill effectively. Now, we're looking at them compared to the Waystalkers of the Wood Elves, who are again another missile-focused hero unit. Now, we can see they actually stack up very similarly. They cost a little bit more than the Waystalkers, but 40 armor, leadership 75 for the Handmaidens, a little bit higher than the Waystalkers. Speed, Waystalkers take the edge. Melee attack, going to the Handmaidens. Melee defense, again the Handmaidens. Weapon strength 360. So all in all, close combat, looks like the Handmaidens have the advantage a bit. Now looking at charge bonus, it's negligible the difference, but 28 versus 22 going to the Waystalkers. Ammunition 30, same for both, but the ammunition of the Handmaidens, flaming and magical, and I can't stress that enough, flaming, magical, armor piercing. These guys and the Sisters of Avalon, who we have coming up, just do devastating damage if they have sort of clear sight and aren't interfered with. Range 180, a little bit less than the Waystalker, and missile damage 223, less than the Waystalker's missile damage as well. So it seems like the Waystalker has better kind of shooting over distance, although they don't have armor piercing, they don't have flaming, but they will do more damage just naturally over their missiles, but the Handmaidens will do better in close-to-close combat, in hand-to-hand combat even. And yeah, so that's the difference between the Handmaidens and the Waystalkers. Moving on from them, we have the Sisters of Avalon, who I mentioned before. These guys are the new missile unit, and we kind of compared, I just went for a cost comparison, because there's not really a fair head-to-head comparison for these guys. These guys do armor piercing, magic, and flame missile damage. Their range is 180, a little bit less than the Waystalkers. They also don't fire in 360. They fire in forward arc. They don't fire all around like the Waystalkers are able to do. But let's start from the top. They have more armor than the Waywatchers. Well, not Waystalkers, sorry, Waywatchers, apologies. They have more leadership. They're a little bit slower. Their melee attack is better. Their melee defense is better. Their weapon strength is the same. Charge bonus effectively the same. Ammunition roughly the same as well. Now, their range a little bit less than the Waywatchers, but missile damage a little bit less than the Waywatchers as well. But making up for it is that I think these guys, head-to-head, charging down on them, I think they do the most damage to anything that gets near them. Because that magic, flaming, they'll get you with one of them. Armor piercing, they can just devastate some of your more elite units if they're allowed to fire at them. So you really want to get in, throw away an eagle or throw away one of your flying units just to distract these girls while you are getting into combat, because they will destroy anything coming at them. It's magic to see, honestly. So that is the Sisters of Avalon. So moving on from the Sisters, we have two, the Shadow Warriors and the Shadowwalkers. Now the Shadowwalkers, as far as I understand from what I've been able to play of the DLC so far, guys, is that the Shadowwalkers are only available to Aleph Anna in the campaign. Obviously they're available in the custom, but I think they might be unique to the Nagara faction in the custom battles. Now the difference is fairly negligible between the two, so let's run through the difference between Shadowwalkers and Shadow Warriors, who are both coming to us in this DLC. I think the Shadowwalkers may be coming as part of the free LC. I think that's how they're going, but the Shadow Warriors on the other hand won't be. So armor, the same. Leadership, negligible, but going to the Shadowwalkers. Speed, the same. Melee attack, edging out on the Shadowwalkers with poison damage on their melee attack, and the Shadow Warriors with 36 there. Defense, again, edged out by the Shadow Walkers. Weapon strength, again, edging out the Shadow Warriors by a bit. Charge, again, edging them out. And ammunition, the same. Range, the same. Missile damage, edging them out. So, apart from the hit points, and that's really because there are less of them. There are 20 less Shadow Walkers than there are Shadow Warriors. They are just better Shadow Warriors with poison damage. That seems to be the main difference. And their weapons are pretty good. They're okay fighting. Shadow Warriors do decent in melee against something like artillery pieces, stuff like that. But these are the Shadow Walkers. Now, if we're going to compare them against other stuff, all we can really look at, the closest comparison I could think of, are the Deepwood Scouts and the Way Watchers. Deepwood Scouts with Master Ambusher as well, which is the same thing these guys have, and the Way Watchers, as you can see there. Now, the Shadow Warriors and the Way Watchers kind of both team up. They both fire in 360 arcs, I think, and they match up fairly well, except for poison. That's kind of switched out for armor piercing with the Way Watchers. Now, Deepwood Scouts are the cheapest of all of these units, and they're okay, but I think they're beaten out in almost every area by the Shadow Warriors. So that's kind of giving you an area of comparison there. They have the same range, same missile damage. They have a little bit more ammo than the Shadow Warriors, but charge bonus, weapon, everything up from there is going to the Shadow Warriors. And that's why they're more expensive. But, you know, a fair comparison in terms of, like, lining them up in the way they line up with these kind of familiar Wood Elf units. So that's how those guys operate. To give you a bit of a hint on them, Shadow Walkers, upgraded version of Shadow Warriors, but there are less of them. And they do poison, which would be helpful in trying to just slow everything down. Alright guys, so that's those units. So moving on to the Dark Elf units, and we will start with the new Legendary Lord for the Dark Elves, Helbron. Now, Helbron here is a hard one to compare anyone to. She has two swords, well, she has a sword and a dagger, effectively, and the only person I could think of in the other Legendary Lords who doesn't have a shield, who can be on foot, was Kazarak One-Eye. Now, it's not obviously a perfect comparison, but I figured we'd go for it. And who's not a magic user, who's also focused on melee combat. So they have those things familiar with them that they have in common. Now, as we can see, Helbron is a bit more expensive at 1860 compared to Kazarak's 1361. And she has a little bit less health than Kazarak, way less armor, better leadership, however, a little bit quicker, better melee attack with poison, a little bit worse melee defense, and her weapon strength, although is less than Kazarak's, but she is anti-infantry and armor piercing, so potentially doing a lot of damage, and her charge bonus is slightly less than Kazarak's. Now, to remind you guys with these Legendary Lord, this is them vanilla. This isn't her on her mount, her manticore, or her shrine, and this isn't Kazarak on his chariot. This is both of them just on foot, which is why it's hard to make Legendary Lord comparisons, but just to give you an idea of what we're looking at in terms of her combat efficiency, comparable to Kazarak, but maybe a little bit better in terms of just doing damage there, anti-infantry, armor piercing, although her weapon strength isn't quite as high, but that melee attack is pretty high, 10 higher than Kazarak's. So that's it for Crone Helbron. She also has a couple of other traits to go along to kind of boost her up and validate that higher price than the one Kazarak has. So Helbron, great character, fun mechanics behind her, and that's her compared to Kazarak One-Eye. So moving on from Helbron, let's have a look at the new generals for the Dark Elves, the Supreme Sorceresses. Now, we've taken the Supreme Sorceress of Fire here, and we're comparing her to a High Elf Mage. Now, as you can see, their healths are about 400 apart. The Dark Elf Sorceress, less armor, better leadership, however, better speed, better melee attack, better melee defense, same weapon strength and same charge bonus. All in all, they're fairly similar. This is, again, them without any mounts or anything like that. They're fairly similar, just going in vanilla. Just a little bit better health. And you know what? If it came down to it, would probably take a High Elf Mage in hand-to-hand combat without the use of any magic. So that's the new Supreme Sorceresses for you there, guys. So moving on from them, let's go on to some of the units and have a look at the Sisters of Slaughter. Now, a lot of people are curious about how the Sisters of Slaughter will differentiate themselves from the Witch Elves, so I just actually took the unit stat comparison just straight up from the page and put it on there for the Witch Elf comparison. As we can see, 1,000 less health, and the first thing you have to notice about the armor is the shield aspect on the Sisters of Slaughter. This gives them a 35% chance of blocking incoming missiles. Now, that is much better than the Witch Elves, and that maybe in itself validates their higher price. But their leadership is higher, their speed is the same, melee attack slightly higher with poison, melee defense much better than the Witch Elves, and weapon strength a little bit higher at 39 compared to the Witch Elves 32. Charge bonus goes to the Witch Elves with a +4 there. Now, as you can see, there is some sort of crossover there with the idea of how they fight and the way they're doing. They're kind of both kind of berserker units, but you have to say, though, Sisters of Slaughter look a bit more durable, and they also have that trait that makes them better fighters when they're losing, which goes into the idea of them being gladiators always looking for a challenge, as they are in the lore. So that's how the two of them compare, for those of you who are curious. The other unit I wanted to throw in there just to have a look at was the Marauder Berserkers, who we're getting now that you guys had Norska, and that is 15 armor, 80 leadership, weapon strength higher than both of these girls, melee defense about the same as the Witch Elves, but bear in mind a bit more armor, no shield though for the Berserkers. Melee defense, again, as I said, on par of the Witch Elves. Melee weapon strength much higher, charge bonus much higher. So it looks like, it's hard to say with the poison and stuff, but, you know, a Berserker would hold his own against these guys, despite being the cheaper, it looks like. We'd have to wait and see. I think the bonuses of the Witch Elves and the Sisters of Slaughter would actually maybe kick in and give them the advantage there against the Marauder Berserkers. But that would be an interesting matchup and may require some testing. But that's about it for the Sisters of Slaughter. Moving on, we have the Doomfire Warlocks, the quick cavalry, with ability to do bound magic spells. Now, the magic spells they have are Soul Blight and Lesser Doombolt. And that is, they're very fast infantry, poison attacks, and as you can see here, melee attacks with magic damage and poison damage. That is pretty good for chasing down stuff, if you ask me. Now, the one I can think to compare them to were the Sisters of the Fawn. Now, Sisters of the Fawn obviously have missiles, so it's not necessarily a banging fair comparison, but you know what, they both have bound spells, so I thought we'd have a look at what they have to offer. Armor about the same, leadership is less for the Doomfire Warlocks, speed much higher for the Doomfire Warlocks, melee attack a little bit lower, but no poison and magic for the Sisters of the Fawn. Melee defense is much lower for the Doomfire Warlocks than it is for Sisters of the Fawn. Weapon strength much higher though, and charge bonus higher by 10. So it looks like they're a bit more kind of shock-fast cavalry than anything else. With those spells, they can hover around the edges, doing some damage where they can. Really kind of the ultimate opportunists. They're fizzing around your flanks, causing all kinds of hassle for you. There's also a lot more of them than the Sisters of the Fawn, although, as you can see, the health comparison isn't that wide, so one would have to imagine on a per-unit basis, health much lower. So that's about it for the Doomfire Warlocks, guys. And that really does it for the new units we're getting in the Queen and the Crone. It's been fun playing it, guys. Do check out some of my gameplay videos. If you want to know a little bit more about the legendary lords themselves, do check out my lore videos on Helbron and Alariel. And other than that, guys, as always, a huge thank you all for listening, and I hope to catch you all on the next one. Alright, guys, bye.